Hey guys, this is Ron. I want to introduce you to a couple of my friends. This guy on the far left, his name is Steve. Next to him is Brian. Next to him is Jason. Next to him is Clay. And that's me on the far right. I'm Ron. Now let me ask you this. How many times have you been introduced to somebody and 2 seconds later you can't remember what they said their name was? Could you right now tell me the names of my friends? If you're like most people, this happens all the time. And in this video, I'm going to show you how to remember names and faces with ease. Hey guys, this is Ron White from the National Geographic show Brain Games. When I was on Brain Games, they had me meet a room full of people in a theater, and then I went back around the theater as they came out the door, and I said all of their names. I'm going to show you exactly how I did that. So now I'm going to give you 5 things that you need to remember any name and a face. The 5 points are focus, file, picture, action, and review. Again, those are focus, file, picture, action, and review. So let's go on to step number 1, which is focus. You shake somebody's hand and 2 seconds later you don't know their name. It's not because you have a bad memory, it's because you weren't listening, you weren't focused. Really, the most honest thing you could say to them at that moment is, hey, you know, a few minutes ago when you gave me your name, I wasn't even listening to you. That would be the most honest thing you could say, but you're not going to say it, and nobody's ever said it because it's not polite. But the true thing is if you're not focused, you're not going to remember the name. How do you focus yourself? Develop this habit. Every time you're walking towards somebody, get in the habit of asking yourself this question. What is their name? What is their name? What is their name? Now, don't say that out loud, but as you're walking towards somebody, develop the habit. You walk into a room, there's a room full of people you've never met. You walk towards somebody, what is their name? What is their name? What is their name? It will focus you. Now, just be sure you don't say it out loud. That would be embarrassing. The next point is a file. Think about it. Whenever you store something on your computer, you have a document, you store it in the file on your computer called My Documents. So when you need it later, you go back to your Documents folder and you get the document out. Your computer needs files for you to retrieve information later, and your brain is the same way. You need a file to retrieve that name, a place where you can go to get it and retrieve it later. All right, so now let's move on to step number 2, which is selecting a file on their face to remember the name. For your brain, when you remember names and faces, the files are landmarks or locations on their face. You meet someone and they have big ears. Those ears become your file. If you meet someone and they have a big chin, their chin becomes your file. Or if they have a beard or pretty eyes or a big nose or a bald head, these unique distinguishing features become your files, your locations where you're going to go back to later to remember their name. Make sense so far? Good. Now let's move on to step number 3. Number 3 is you need a picture for the name. Have you ever said before, you know what, I am so good with faces, I never forget a face, I just can't think of your name? Well, big deal. My dog remembers your face. You remember a face because you saw the face. You don't remember a name because you never saw the name. The mind remembers what it sees. What that means is we need to create pictures for names so we can see the name along with the face. For example, the picture for the name Steve for me is a stove. Steve is a stove. Brian is a brain. Jason, I use a blue jay, like a blue jay flying, blue jay for Jason. Clay, I use clay, like you mold clay with your hands, clay for the name Clay. And for the name Ron, I use run for Ron. All right, pretty simple, right? Let's go on to step number 4. Step number 4 is action. You need to see these pictures with tons of action and emotion. Your brain remembers action and emotion. So let's go back to my friends and let's look at Steve. Steve's the guy on the far left. Remember, we need to ask ourselves, what is his name? That focuses. The next thing we need to do is pick a distinctive feature on his face, a file. Well, his distinctive feature could be his bald head. And then his name is Steve. We turn that into a picture, and with action and emotion, we imagine a stove on his head. So look at Steve, look at his bald head, and imagine right now you are cooking that bald head in a stove. Let's move to the right. The next guy, ask yourself, what is his name? And then ask yourself, what stands out to you about his face? Well, perhaps his nose. I can say this, he's been my best friend for 30 years, but the dude has got a huge nose. His nose is his distinctive file. His name is Brian. Brian, the picture for that is a brain. So we imagine a brain dripping out of his nose. Now, if Brian had big ears, we would see it dripping out of his ears, a brain. If he had big eyes, we would see the brain dripping out of his eyes. But he has a big nose, so we see a brain coming out of his nose. Let's move to the next guy. Jason is his name, and we said the picture for the name Jason is a blue jay. Well, Jason's facial feature, you see his Adam's apple in the picture there, kind of sticking out? That's going to be the feature that you zoom in on. I want you to imagine a blue jay flying across and landing and hitting him right there in the Adam's apple. Now go back and review the guy with the bald head. What was cooking his head? A stove for Steve. The next guy, what was coming out of his nose? A brain for Brian. The next guy, what was flying towards his Adam's apple? A blue jay for Jason. And then the next guy, what stands out to you on his face? For me, it's his cheekbones. His name is Clay. So we take clay, like we're molding clay, and we imagine we're molding his cheekbones with clay. His cheeks are made out of clay. And that's me on the far right, Ron. Maybe you see running, and you see running around my chin right there, running for Ron, running on my chin. Let's see how this works. Let's test it out. Going back, bald head, stove, Steve. Nose, brain, Brian, Adam's apple, blue jay, Jason, cheeks, Clay, a man running for Ron. That is how you remember names, and that's the fourth step of making action and emotion. Now, the fifth and final step of this process is review, and it's just what it says. At the end of every day, get in the habit of asking yourself, who did I meet today? And not only review the person, but ask yourself, what was their distinguishing feature? Their hair, their eyes, their nose, their mouth, their chin. But ask yourself, what was the picture coming out of that distinctive feature? And just get in the habit of reviewing them. The next day when you're driving to work, review who you met the previous day. An important point to remember, once you determine that every Brian is a brain, or whatever you determine, that is that picture for that name for the rest of your life. If you determine Steve is a stove, every Steve from now on is going to be a stove. Then when you see these people 6 months later, or 6 weeks later, or 6 days later, don't try to remember their name. Instead, ask yourself the question, what stood out to me about their face? Oh yeah, it was his nose. What was coming out of his nose? Brain. Hey, Brian. And that is how you remember names and faces. All right, guys, I'm not going to lie to you. This takes a little bit of work. When I first started 20 years ago doing this, I could only remember 3 names in a room full of 5 people. But 20 years later, I have done as many as 301 names in one afternoon at a conference, walking around just reading their name tags. The way you build up to this is you get predetermined pictures for names. Steve's a stove, Lisa's the Mona Lisa, Karen is a carrot, Brian is a brain, Matt is a doormat. And I have taken the 50 most common names and I've put them in a file, and I'm going to give it to you 100% for free. All you have to do is click right here at easynamememory.com, or you can click the link below and get my pictures for 50 most common names for free, and then you will be well on your way to remembering a room full of names and faces and building relationships. All right, guys, so go ahead and click the link right here or click the link below in the description, and I'll see you on the next page. All right, guys, we got tons more videos coming out soon on how to memorize information. You're going to want this information, so make sure that you click the link right here and subscribe to my channel. Go ahead, click right here and subscribe. And also, you're going to want to get those pictures for names for free. Click right here and you'll get the pictures for names.